we're going to turn the meeting over to our guest speaker, who is Dan Myers, and he is from the Kelso Train Station Volunteers. If I've got that wrong, please correct me.
Actually, we call it the Kelso Longview Train Depot Volunteers.
Okay.
Because we want to be inclusive of everyone.
Thank you very much.
And actually, the depot does serve both communities.
Absolutely.
We got these up front. Whatever.
Do you need this, Mike? I don't know if it,
I think I can speak quite loudly enough.
yes, you do.
He does.
Okay. Thank you.
Back there.
Well, they say before you criticize someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes. And that way you'll be a mile away and you'll have their shoes. We got contact on them. Let's see if I can wake up the computer now. There we are. Yeah, it might help. I'm going to give a little presentation first off on what the volunteers do, and then I'm going to go into give us some history on the trains in this Pacific Northwest because it's an interesting history. But the volunteers, what we do over there is just basically help people out, and we help in many ways. We have luggage. If you have a garage sale and you have luggage left over, you can donate it to us. We hold it in the back. We see people show up once in a while. They got their belongings in a black plastic bag, and the train won't take that. So we watch for those people, and we give them a suitcase or something to put their things in. We've also looked after, besides answering a lot of questions, it was just a couple of weeks ago, somebody came up and was talking at the window. I answered his question, he left, but he left his paycheck. And I didn't notice it until the train left, and he was on that train. So the conductor called the depot, and if there was nobody there to call, it wouldn't have been any good, but we were there. He gave me an address to mail the check to, and I immediately put it in the post office, and he got his check. We recovered lost luggage, lost purses. There was a wallet left one time, and the conductor called and said, passengers got on the train there in Kelso, and he left his wallet. He's missing his wallet. He doesn't know where it is. So we went out and looked, and there it was under the bench. So I said, yeah, we've got it, identified the name, matched it up. We gave it to the next northbound train, and they got it to him. So we help people out, and that's kind of nice. It's a good thing to do if you're retired because it gives you something to do once in a while. The most we ask is about 4 hours a month. You can do more than that. After you've done 100 hours, we give you a vest with your name embroidered on it. I do the embroidery. Then after 500 hours, you get one of these pins. I have 2 of them. We have some people with 5 of them. So you put in as many hours you'd like. Come down. We have 3 shifts a day. We start at 8:30 in the morning. First train comes in about 9 o'clock. So that covers that, and then we 8:30 to 12:30, 12:30 to 4:30, and then 4:30 in the afternoon till 8:30 at night. The last train comes in just about 8:30 at night. So that covers all the trains that come through, the passenger trains. And it's really nice because the people really like to have someone there they can ask a question of. There's a lot of people, it's the first time they've ridden the train, and they're not sure what they should do. I've helped people purchase tickets many, many times. They have a kiosk there. Some people are a little bit intimidated by computerized gadgets, and I help them out with that. So if there's somebody here who says, I've got spare time, and I think it sounds like an interesting thing, please investigate and contact me. Come over to the depot, pick up an application, fill it out. The thing is, we're having our annual meeting on the 10th of this month. And at that meeting, we're giving away a $500 gift certificate for train travel, a $250 gift certificate for train travel, and a $100 gift certificate for train travel. So that helps out a little bit. That's the only perks we get. We get our revenue from the snack machines that are in the depot. We made arrangements with the Pepsi distributor, and I can't think of it now all of a sudden. And the vendor, but I can't think of his name. It's Corwin Beverage, and with Evergreen Vending, and they put 2 snack machines in, and they give us the proceeds from that. So that's our only revenue other than donations, which we get sometimes $20 to $30 a month in donations just dropped in the little can outside the window. So people really appreciate it. I helped a blind man make his way to the spot and get on the train. I've helped other disabled people. It's just being helpful, and it's a good feeling. And we sure could use a few more volunteers because we're running short on people right now. We started with about 60, and we're down to about 31, I think, is the last count. Okay, that's the end of the commercial. You may recognize Abraham Lincoln. The possibility of trains coming into the Pacific Northwest was made possible by Abraham Lincoln in 1864 when he signed the Northern Pacific Charter, which authorized the Northern Pacific Corporation to build a railway connection from the Great Lakes to Puget Sound. And that was going to come from Chicago, and it was going to go to Tacoma, because Tacoma was the largest city on the Sound at that time. Construction began shortly after that, and the first section of the right-of-way in the Washington Territory was between Kalama and Tacoma, and this is some work being done at Rocky Point. In January 1874, we actually had train service running between Kalama and Tacoma. That's 1874. So to put that in perspective, well, Kelso at that time was known as Crawfordsville. This is coming into Crawfordsville from going north, and that's what it looked like in 1875, approximately. And this photo is courtesy of the College Historical Museum. And it was named after Peter Crawford. Most of us know the Peter Crawford Bridge, or the Cowlitz Way Bridge, depending on what you call it. But to put things in perspective historically, I like to go through a little process here. This is the, who knows what that is? That's the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. It goes between Manhattan and Brooklyn, and this is the spinning of the cables. It was quite an engineering feat, and it was actually started in 1867. Okay? In 1874 is when we had the service between Kalama and Tacoma, rail service. So that was only 7 years after they started work on the Brooklyn Bridge. And then Custer was defeated 2 years after that. Think about that for a second. We were still fighting Indians pretty heavily in 1876. And when the trains were running here, they were still fighting Indians in the Midwest. In 1881, Kelso was incorporated officially, and then in May of 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge was completed. You see, that took, well, it's 16 years to build that bridge. Fascinating story. I've read the story of the Brooklyn Bridge, but I won't go into that. In September of 1883, the Great Lakes to Pacific rail line was completed. This was called the Northern Pacific. The one a little earlier, the one that went the first transcontinental, that Golden Spike was driven in Promontory Point, Utah. That was the Central Pacific. And then later came the Southern Pacific. So you had the Central Pacific, the Northern Pacific, and then the Southern Pacific. In 1886, Crawford family donated land for a depot. They wanted them to have a nice stop here in Kelso. And in 1889, Washington became a state. So we had trains running long before this was even a state. By 1901, trains were running pretty regularly between, I missed it there. They were running regularly between Seattle and Portland. Seattle had now become a pretty big city. The rail line had been extended to Portland. But to get across the river, they went by ferry boat. They put the whole train on a ferry boat in Kalama and went across over to what's now Gobel, right close to there. This ferry boat down at the visitor center in Kalama. It's built by a local model builder. What, did I get something out of place here? Yeah, I did. Please forgive me, I'll shuffle my brain. Okay, rail traffic was blossoming by 1906. Well, actually, in 1905, they opened up a bridge. So the ferry only ran for a few years. This bridge is still in use today. By 1906, Kelso petitioned for a new, better in Kelso is nearly complete. It was actually dedicated in February 12th of 1912, and we had a 100-year celebration our group put on at that time. I should tell you that the volunteer group was started in 2009 by myself when a group came down from Olympia to the city council and said, you ought to have some volunteers to staff that station, because Amtrak says there's not enough traffic here to justify a full-time employee, and the thing sits vacant, and there's vandalism and vagrancy there, and it's such a nice looking station because they'd done quite an extensive remodel on it a few years earlier. And the mayor looked up and down and he said, anyone want to take that on? And I said, yeah, I will. And so that's how it got started. I used some boilerplate articles of incorporation that I found on the internet, drafted that and some bylaws. We published notice of a first meeting, an organizational meeting. We had about 60 people show up. It was really encouraging. And that's how we got started. Okay, back to this. Six years after this depot opened, the Longview Lumber Company decided to expand their timber operations in the Pacific Northwest. In May of 1921, Wesley Vandercook, Longvill's chief engineer, set up headquarters in Kelso, and with 100 men began mapping the land acquired by Longview. Took them 100 guys to go out and do the surveying and the mapping. They had purchased quite a bit of property. As word of the planned development spread, Kelso rolled out the red carpet and told Mr. Long that he could change the name of Kelso to whatever suited his vision. And his response was he didn't want some stump-filled mill town being part of his planned city. So then we had start of some bad blood between Longview and Kelso. And I don't know, it seems to have carried forever. We still seem to have a competition. So the high school football games when I was going to R.A. Long added to that between Kelso and R.A. Long. Longview needed to bring log trains down from the operations center up in Riderwood, and they sought permission to use the existing rail. But this was probably politically motivated, fears of logs falling off of the train in the Rocky Point Tunnel was one of the main reasons they didn't grant the request. Actually, I think Kelso was needling Longview a little bit there and got that put through. The solution then was to build a company rail line, the Longview, Portland, and Northern Railroad, the LP&N. And this is one of their locomotives that they had. It was Mr. Long's own holding company that built this railroad. It ran up the west bank of the Cowlitz River, and here you see the LP&N southbound at Beacon Hill. Now West Side Highway runs along on on the side of it here, but that rail line still is there. It's now Patriot Rail. And to get through, Kelso again said, we're not going to have your silly log trains holding up traffic in West Kelso, so we can't have you do that. So they made him build a viaduct and some overpasses. You see the competition is still going strong. I don't know how many people even remember the overpasses in Kelso, but you can see the Allen Street Bridge back in the distance there. You can remember it? Good for you.
Well, I just remember the concrete part they'd already had.
Yeah, and I talked to one man who said that when he was a little kid and the railroad had been abandoned, this part of it, they put out word that anybody needed fill dirt could come take it and dig it out of the elevated portion here and haul it away for free. And so he and his grandfather hauled many pickup loads of dirt and put it someplace on their property. So that's how they got rid of it, is they just let people take it away. That runs between 4th and 5th in West Kelso. You can still see it if you look for it. You can see that that one stretch does not have the old houses on it. The older houses are on both sides. This is probably about 1928, 29. Yeah. In 1925, R.A. Long decided he wanted the passenger trains to come into Longview instead of into Kelso. Here we go again. Going to compete with each other. So he built this beautiful brick train depot at the end of the Broadway. It opened in 1928 with 4 trains. He petitioned and got the trains to come through to this track. I used to wonder how they got out, but actually they went north all the way up to Olyquaw and crossed over at Olyquaw and got back on the main line there. So now they'd stole the passenger service from Kelso.
So there wasn't any passenger service at Kelso at that time?
I don't think there was, no. So it all moved over to Longview. And of course, Kelso had strong ICC objection when the petition was filed, but it was finally granted, and passenger trains began using the LP and N line in 1928. They had 2 northbound and 2 southbound trains a day, passenger trains. Unfortunately, now that's the back of the depot. It's beautiful. And of course, the dedication ceremony was great, and they had a lot of other celebrations there. And OSHA loves this picture. So there's the Kiwanis Band. This is near the depot. I don't know the details on this picture. It would be nice to know who was being honored and what was going on, but I've never been able to find out. But unfortunately, in December of 1933, they had a huge flood in this area, and it washed out the tracks, the LP&N tracks. This is right near where Nevada Drive comes down now. A place that still has flooding once in a while. I lived on Lomar Drive for a while, so I know that area real well. And up in Arkansas Creek, the trestle washed out really badly. There's a couple of pictures of the trestle washed out. And it was in the midst of the Depression. And so Longview decided to save its meager dollars, and the shiny new station was left high and dry. It later became Cowles General Hospital, and then it was torn down, and now there's a medical center at that location. And that was actually positioned very strategically because it was right at the end of Broadway. So that was a beautiful entrance into Longview. You get off Broadway and you look right down at the Hotel Monticello, and it was a nice entry into Longview coming in by train. And Mr. Long, I don't think, anticipated how big air travel would become. So he kind of missed the boat on that one. They did set aside some land for an airport, but that eventually was developed into other things. After World War II, the Northern Pacific embarked on a massive modernization program, included in that was the expansion. You can see the new roof here. That was added to the original depot about 1949. But in the late 50s, railroad passenger business took a series of hits from which it has never really recovered. The interstate highway system was signed into law in 1956. A general recession hit in 57 and 58, and the ICC failed to terminate the, quote, temporary excise tax that they'd put on in wartime on passenger train tickets. They never terminated that. And then also Boeing launched the first commercial jet airliner into the sky. So it was a turning point for people traveling. In May of 1971, the Kelso depot was closed and vacated. The new Amtrak train considered Kelso only a flag stop. Kelso's depot began a long, slow slide towards oblivion, prodded along by our weather in this area. Then in the early 1990s, Congress passed the Ice-T bill, and the Seattle-Eugene route was designated as the Pacific Northwest Rail Corridor. And work on the depot's resurrection began in 1994. $3.3 million was spent renovating the Kelso station. I could say some things I won't. The roof is a disaster. We got a lifetime guarantee on the roof that was put on. It's crumbling and falling apart, but the contractor that put it on is out of business, and the manufacturer that created this stuff is also out of business. So the lifetime warranty, I don't know whose lifetime it was good for, but we're a little bit frustrated now because we had a tile fall off the roof just last week, almost hit somebody. So all that dollars was spent, and it was designated then a multimodal transportation center. It included the buses to stop there, and they even put in some bicycle storage lockers down at the south end. When our depot group started in 2009, we went out and found out that somebody homeless was living in one of those bicycle lockers. He had all this stuff packed in there, and he'd go in there at night and sleep, I guess. So the lockers were taken out. The city buses thought it was too difficult to maneuver around Watkins Tractor's trucks that they were bringing in. So the city buses moved their bus stop over to Pacific. And Greyhound, they got somebody over at Holt's Market here on, I think it's on Oregon Way, to take the tickets and deal. So that they moved their bus stop over there. The depot was basically abandoned. And that's when we got going. We have volunteer staffers at the depot 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also keep people informed if the train's running on time or not. We got a little computer set up and a big screen in the lobby area that we can post the arrival times of the trains and what we can check the status of them online and then put it on that screen so people can keep up with that. And then our group went to a couple of the Cubs meetings and suggested they change the routes and come back over there. And we came up with a way that they could avoid the Watkins Tractor trucks and stuff that they were parking along their business. And they put the buses back at the depot. So now the city buses come back to the depot. And then we looked around and found somebody. We actually got in touch with CAP, and they were willing to put their transit dispatchers in there and also deal with Greyhound tickets. So we have a Greyhound ticket seller there now, and the Greyhound buses come back. So it's coming back as a multimodal station, and it's through the efforts of the depot volunteers to some extent. So that's who we are. Here we have one of our fellows talking with a customer. We built a float, put it in the Highlander Festival Parade in 2011, because that was just about the start of a new century for the depot. And our mission statement is to provide as much as possible volunteer staffing for the Kelso Longview Train Depot, to assist travelers by announcing arriving and departing trains, answering travel-related questions, and to be courteous ambassadors of the community. So that's what we try to do. We try to make people feel comfortable coming in if they're visiting, and we've had people visit from all over. I was there one particular rainy day when two gentlemen from Canada who had bicycled all the way to South America and back got totally frustrated with the downpour and came into Kelso to put their bikes and themselves on the train to finish back to BC. And I've met people from other countries who've come here. It's just fascinating to talk to them. Why they come to Kelso is various reasons, but it's always fun to talk to them. The atmosphere over there does allow quite a bit of time for casual conversation. We don't have a large push of people coming. But we get about 1,000 people a month getting on and off the train in Kelso, which is a surprising number. We've been logging them all the time we've been there. We've seen it grow up a little bit. We think, I talk to people. In fact, I had never taken the train in a long time, not since I was in the Navy. And we decided to take a train trip. And so my wife and I have taken several train trips now. And it's a lot of fun. So, I can answer any questions if you want. Yes?
Yeah, you were talking about the roof and the condition it is. Who owns the depot?
We've asked that question. It seems that there's some paperwork. Kelso does the maintenance on it, but it's possible that Burlington Northern has retained the ownership of it and is contracting, but they're contracting for the maintenance and upkeep with Kelso, but it's not totally clear. So we're now in a situation, it's everybody's finger pointing the other direction, because it's going to be expensive to replace that roof.
Are taxes paid on it?
Pardon?
Are taxes paid yearly on it? I mean, does somebody pay taxes on this thing like we do property tax?
Well, property tax goes for funding all sorts of things.
Who pays it?
No, this, the depot paid, is there property taxes on the depot? Do they pay?
Probably there is, like a commercial building. And if there is, I would say probably Kelso is the one that's paying that. I haven't looked at the budget for that particular item, so I don't know.
Is this the original land that donated? This is south of the original,
This is south of the original depot, right.
but it's still part of the...
Originally, this was owned by Burlington Northern, or by Northern Pacific, and then Northern Pacific became Burlington Northern when it merged with some others. So the land was, when this opened, it was a Northern Pacific depot, and they owned it. But when the renovation came in, there was some changes, and I don't know. And Kelso was the primary. I mean, what do they call it? They applied for the grants and got the grants, and
Well, it's a historical site.
it is historical. It's got a bronze plaque at the end with a wonderful misprint.
Does it say Longview on it?
No, I should challenge you to go find out what the error on that plaque is, because I'd looked at the plaque many times and didn't realize what it was. It was somebody from Olympia says, "Yeah, you got that plaque with the error on it, the misprint," and I had to go look at it.
You mean spell Washington?
No, they misspelled formerly. Yes, they called it formally, so they used the wrong word actually, because it says the formerly known as the Northern Pacific Depot, only says formerly known as the so whoever took, yeah, it was autocorrect or something and took care of it for them. And they're working now to upgrade the tracks, and the Washington Department of Transportation says by 2023, which is not that many years off now, about 7 years, that we will have high-speed rail going through here at over 100 miles an hour. And that the travel from Portland to Seattle will be about 1 hour. And from Seattle to BC will be just over an hour.
Well, those won't stop in Kelso, will they?
Well, we hope they'll still stop in Kelso. There's no other stop. There's a Vancouver, and then there's Kelso, and then the next one is Centralia. So there's a pretty good span in there, a distance. I hope they'll continue to stop at Kelso, but I don't know that they will.
Dan?
Yes.
Do you know when they made the Longview station into a hospital?
That would have been about 1929 or no, it was 33 was the flood. That's when they closed it. So it would have been after 1933. About 1934 or 35 they changed it.
Sometime they had two hospitals, like Kelso and Longview.
I know about the Kelso Hospital. Yeah. And that building was moved.
I thought it burned down in 1942.
It may have been the building next to it that was moved. Because I've got lots of pictures of historical pictures of Kelso. And there's a building that was right on that street. Because the Kelso Hospital was right on this corner of Academy and Pacific. And it may have been the next house in when they built the church there. That house was moved about 2 blocks up and is now the funeral home. That house was actually physically moved. Any other questions? Discussion? This is fun. Yes?
Well, you know, you're talking about Burlington North. Wasn't the Great Northern, didn't they have a route through here? Union Pacific had?
I put on my hat. Great Northern. Yes, Great Northern actually, I don't think they came to Kelso, but they came to Seattle and they came to Portland. And that's the train
They run through, I mean, they had a right, well, they call it right away, but they were able to use that track.
Yes, all the tracks are owned right now in this area by Burlington Northern. And Amtrak pays to have access to and to use those tracks. I took the Great Northern myself in 1961 when I came home on leave from the Navy. I took the Illinois Central up to Chicago, and the Illinois Central was so overbooked because it was Christmas time that they put 2 extra cars on in the back for service people, and those cars had no heat. So I was back there with my pea coat on and shivering, and got to Chicago, changed trains there, and got on Great Northern, and had a great trip from there because I was in one of the dome cars, and I was up high and I could see the scenery. It was a great trip. I've also been, last year I went to Montana, and I visited a number of depots along the way. I started in Shelby, Montana, went over to, I can't think of the name of the town.
Aver?
That doesn't sound right. This is west, going west from Shelby. The next depot, I can't think of the name of it. And then the next one after that is at the entrance of Glacier Park. It's a neat depot. And then you go, there's one by the Isaac Walton Lodge. There's a depot there. Then the next one's at Whitefish. And then that's where I headed south and got away from the tracks a little bit. It was a fun trip. I went through Glacier Park. There's a lot of history with the railroads, and they may be an answer to transportation problem. I don't know. It's a tough one because it's still hard to get to the train, except for me. I live 2 blocks from the depot. I walk over there all the time. And when I take a train trip, I just grab my bags and we walk over to the station and get on the train. And it's less walking than if you're walking from the economy parking down in Portland to the terminal building. In fact, it's less from the entrance of the terminal building to usually the concourse I'm leaving from. Yes.
If they eventually do have this in the future, mode of transportation, I would hope that they would improve on the tracks. But
They've been working on the tracks for a couple of years now. And they took out,
that's encouraging. I think they really took that time down.
yes, because if you drive to Seattle, you may notice that occasionally the traffic gets a little heavy. And we have on days when there's a day game at the stadium up there, either Mariners or the Seahawks, we sometimes get 50 people getting on the train going up to the game. Yes.
I have got on the train in Kelso and taken it down to LA, and I enjoyed the ride, but my dad had business getting up in Seattle, and he got on in LA, and on his way up realized he forgot a hammer. And the train stopped in Kelso, and had me call me up and he said, "You need to come to the station and bring me a hammer." And he stopped, and I had literally
Hand him a hammer. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it is really easy to get access to the train for if you need to, you know, there's a fence there. The fence was the brainchild of the architect who designed the remodeling or the renovation. It's the only station other than Olympia that has a fence. You get on and of course in Portland, and I've traveled to Portland to Seattle quite a bit now, and I'm familiar with most of those depots. But in Vancouver, you walk out of the track side of the depot, and there's the tracks, and you can walk anywhere you want. There's a yellow line, and you're supposed to stay back of that yellow line when there's a train coming. But we have a fence, but I try to tell the volunteers that the fence is just cosmetic if people want to get through, because I had somebody miss a train once because of that fence. He was there, he was waiting. A lot of people got off. There were people meeting people. There's this one little gate. It served as a bottleneck. He was waiting for the people to get through, and that train left. It's only there for a couple of minutes usually. As soon as they can get the people off and people on that they've got on their roster, they're gone. And he was standing right there waiting for these people to come through the gate, being very polite, and the train pulled out, and he goes, "What?" It was tough. And then we had one lady that got off. She was supposed to get off in Centralia. She lived in, oh, now I can't think of the name. It's great being old. But she's supposed to get off at Centralia, and she slept through her stop. So she got off in Kelso. And then she needed to find a way to get back up to where she wanted to go. It's the town just this side of Chehalis, and I can't even think of it. It's on the west side of the freeway. Napavine, thank you. She was going to Napavine, and so we drove her to Napavine.
You did good, Dan. I want to thank you for this whole time.